Next time here on Anime Abandoned, it will be episode number 200.
Mazel tov, my less pudgy compatriot.
Victory is at hand! Now what will it be on?
I don't know.
You're talking crazy, kid. You are sitting in front of a literal shelf of anime. You have to have something.
But not something big enough to warrant a milestone episode. Damn it, I'm screwed.
You know what that sounds like, Savvy?
Not our problem?
Exactamundo. Now let's get to drinking.
Race you to the keg!
Knock yourself out, Miller time. I have my own stocks.
Thanks for your help, guys. Screw this. Guys, did either one of you leave an envelope on the table?
Chug, 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 chug!
You Philistine, you don't chug a 15-year-old Highland Park.
Unless you're a man!
Fuck you guys. Whatever.
Greetings, Bennett. Right now, as you are reading this, a choice is laid before you. Included with this letter are 2 envelopes, both of equal importance to you. However, you may only choose one to open. We advise you to not attempt any kind of chicanery and reward our trust by acting in good faith.
We will know otherwise.
Before you choose, however, we must impress upon you one simple axiom. What comes after the choice is what makes choosing so difficult. But you can always live with the consequences.
Signed, your advocates.
A tarot card?
Holy shit, eBay, here I come!
Well, guys, it's finally here. No fooling, no joking, honest to God, we are finally going to talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Cue the Ron Paul gifts, because after years of incessant comments from you guys, it's happening. First published on January 1st, 1987, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a manga created by writer and artist Hirohiko Araki and centers around the Joestar family, who seems to have a habit of naming their progeny alliterative names, hence the name Jojo. From the 19th century, starting with the first Jojo, Jonathan Joestar, to the current, as of the time of this writing, Josuke Higashikata, who used to be Josephume Kujo. Long story. The many trials and tribulations that followed the Joestar family has been going strong these past 30 years. Suffice it all to say, the Joestar family tree makes the Jirai family tree look like a Charlie Brown reject. Although the setting and time period has shifted and continues to shift all over the course of the run, the most popular and endearing arc of the manga is the third arc, entitled Stardust Crusaders, starring the great-grandson of the patriarch Jonathan Joestar, Jotaro Kujo.
Oh, what a pain.
And he seems so happy about it too. It is no overstatement to call Jotaro and his corresponding arc one of the most endearing and popular stories in manga history. So lasting is this legacy that a 48-episode television series was created on this single arc alone in 2014, an arc that was published 25 years prior. Toonami is in the middle of broadcasting the entire run as we speak, and for younger JoJo fans, that is how they know JoJo as an anime. But for those in the know, this isn't the first time that the arc was animated. Enter the OVA. Released between 1993 and 2002, more on that later, the OVA series and the making thereof is one of the most peculiar stories in anime history. A story of years upon years of delays, outlandish production decisions, cultural tone deafness, political upheaval, and the thorny issue of amendment versus censorship. What better story to tell for the 200th episode of Anime Abandon? Grab a cold one, everyone, and get comfortable, because methinks this is gonna be a yarn. Happy 200th, because this is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Our introduction to Jotaro is a fitting one, considering his school delinquent archetype, as we see him inside a jail cell filled with personal items that he has for reasons unknown, like he was Al Capone. Stuck inside for a bit after putting several gang members in the hospital, he refuses to leave even when his time is up, stating he'll leave when he understands the nature of the evil spirit that resides within him. Of course, why explain it when Jotaro can just simply show everyone what he means? You can't fool me, anime. I've played Persona 3. And sure enough, the bullet is stopped dead by the spirit in question. Thankfully, Grandpa Joseph Joestar and his companion Abdul here promise answers as to the exact nature of the spirit.
The true nature of what you call an evil spirit is a manifestation of the power of your life energy. From the way it appears and stands beside you, we call this vision a stand.
Stands lie within a select few people, and each stand has unique properties affiliated with each stand user. Abdul's stand, Magician's Red, allows him to control fire, Joseph's Hermit Purple allows him to be the Krillin of the group, and Jotaro's stand allows him to perform amazing feats of strength, speed, and precision, almost to a comical degree in some scenes. But what to name this spirit?
Here, from this tarot deck, choose any one card that you like. The Star card. I will name it. Your stand shall be called Star Platinum.
What the? Doesn't the stand get to have a say in its own name?
I want you to meet the Enforcer. I want my name to be Spaghetti. Alright, Spaghetti. Whatever, I don't care.
But so far, Joseph and Abdul's explanation hasn't covered the ever-burning question of why Jotaro suddenly has Spaghetti Platinum looking over his shoulder all the time. However, they theorize that his stand was awakened by the presence of a long-standing enemy of the Joestars.
Yes, I believe that man, the very incarnation of evil, is alive and walking among us. He has awakened from his 100-year sleep. His name is Dio.
Yeah, it's Dio Brando. Yes, Dio Brando, asshole extraordinaire, and he has been the constant lump in the throat of the Joestar lineage this past century. And now that he has awakened, it's up to the three of them, as well as a motley crew of stand users they encounter along the way, to finally put down Dio for good. And that's your basic premise, wrapped up in a neat little bow. Doesn't sound so bizarre when put like that, does it? I mean, sure, the existence of the stands does give the proceedings a much-needed sense of unmistakable identity, but the story and plot is nothing you can't find in your typical hero's journey. Guy is born into a destiny that has him fighting against an evil that has plagued his family for years. You cannot get more basic a good versus evil story than that. So what does make JoJo so bizarre? Well, like many things in this life, it's all in the details, the most immediate of which is how the show looks. Araki definitely has a unique art style and a predilection towards esoteric clothing and posing, which he states as being rooted in his love for Italian fashion and art.
イタリアの良さっていうのはやはりこうなんつうんだろうこう漫画に生かされるねセンスがあるんですよ。その美術的なセンスっていうんですかね。ポージングはやはりイタリア彫刻の影響なんですよ。なんかこうねねじってる感じがねこういう感じ。ああいいなって思って絵にしたいなって思うんですよね。
For a story about jacked up muscle guys beating the crap out of each other, having it be inspired by classical art seems almost surreal. And that's because that's only half the story.
当時映画とかやっぱり好きなんでシルベスター・スタローンとかアーノルド・シュワルツェネガーとかっていうのがこうちょっと流行ってたんですね。でそれって肉体的なキャラクターなんですよ。
Baroque period art and Schwarzenegger.
To be or not to be. Not to be.
It's scary how close that is to being JoJo's. Nevertheless, the seemingly clashing styles and influences surprisingly mesh well together, due in no small part to the efforts at Another Pushpin Planning Studios, or APPP for short, the team behind the OVA.
画面作りがこう重厚なものであったりとか力強いものであったりとかっていうそういうところを、大事にしたいなとか思ってるんですけれど、割と最近のこうアニメの作品はこう、なんていうんですかね軽い絵柄にこうだいぶ流れてってるみたいなんで、そういうものに慣れちゃってる人だと大変かなと。
Personally speaking, I find it really cathartic to hear an animation director talk about how rare it is to animate male characters that aren't wispy little teenagers. But if he felt that way in 2000, I'd shudder to think how we'd feel in 2018. But with such a comparably unique inspiration, with keeping manga in mind, a whole slew of problems can leak into the production of an anime adaptation. As any animator can tell you, transferring a manga artist's style can be a Herculean task if the style in question is heavily detailed like Araki's. So certain sacrifices had to be made in order to complete the animation process. Sacrifices like making only 6 episodes. By now, you've probably noticed that the footage I'm using seems to be from different eras in anime, with one half using digital color and the other using traditional cell painting. And that's because the production of the 13-episode OVA series was split in half, with the last 6 episodes released between 1993 and 1994, and the first 7 episodes released between 2000 and 2002. What?
ところがその第3部っていうのはエピソードが非常にたくさんあって、でそれをこう全6巻の中で収めることはまず不可能であろうというふうな話になりまして、じゃあ一番こう面白くなりそうなエジプトに行ってからそのリオを倒してこう物語を完結させるっていうそこまでをじゃあ、もう、他の人はとにかくファンの人に喜んでもらうものになればいいなという。
Well, I guess that makes a certain kind of sense, and I suppose it's better to do that than let your OVA go unfinished. I'm looking at you, Ninja Resurrection. But if I may interject, if you only had the budget for 6 OVA episodes, maybe you could have stretched it further by not going overseas and hiring Skywalker Studios to do your audio work. Yeah, they did that, both in 1993 and 2000. I suppose you get what you pay for, as the audio for the anime is something truly to behold. Every punch, every impact, every bit of destruction has an almost tangible audio quality.
You do have to bring out, you sort of have to add that extra dimension with the sound, with animation. So the challenge there is to, how do you exaggerate your work with that at the same time, bringing it to life at the same time, not having it sound too exaggerated.
Dio!
Take this!
You old man, your stand is the most pathetic of them all!
If there was any anime that deserved to be in Dolby 5.1, it's JoJo's with a bullet. But it has to be said that this expensive decision not only costs money, but time as well, considering all the effort it took to fly out the directors and translators to Marin County to oversee all this, which leads to yet another problem.
いやいやいや、ムッとしたりっていう前に、とりあえずなんかこっちがなんか言いたいことを向こうに分かってもらうまでが大変でしょ。だって向こうは英語だから、俺英語できないし、もう
ここはこういう風にしてくれって。
そう。だからその一応通訳の人が立ってくれて、一生懸命伝えてくれるんだけども、何しろほら音の話じゃないですか。
微妙なあれがニュアンスが。
そう。それをだからどうしたもんかなと思って。じゃあちょっとね。
Earlier in the interview, Araki remarks about how thrilling it must have been for Kitakubo to direct people that won Academy Awards. And thinking on it, that's probably what this decision came down to. It's not that they felt that the people here would do the best job for what they needed, but rather they wanted to be able to say they got them to do the job, considering the cheesy promo videos here declaring in almost English the anime's Great American Sounds! Which is really ironic when you consider that of all the things that surround JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the one thing that it's probably most famous for is its Japanese sounds. Specifically, its memes.
次にお前はという
That's right, people, we're getting into the dank memes, because you can't do a deep dive without scraping the bottom of the barrel. For those of you who don't wander too far outside their internet comfort zones or only know JoJo's from the more recent anime, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has had a weird sort of life that has existed on the internet since the mid-2000s, and it pretty much centers around the stands and Dio in particular. And I have to be honest, seeing all the recent memes surrounding the current anime series just kind of makes me nostalgic for when I was a 16-year-old shit poster who made terrible memes about anime. By the way, if you know what this is about, or this, then you are my brother. The idiosyncratic and memorable notion of the stands shouting a war cry as they attack and Dio's penchant for doing the exact same thing is rife for memedom, both at the time and certainly today. These days, it's pretty much the same jokes, just with a fresh paint job, but the question still remains. What are they actually supposed to mean? I mean, besides Dio's incessant uselessness.
じゃああれはホラー映画とロックの影響なんですよ。プログレッシブロックっていうのがあって、あとはホラー映画っていうのもまたあるんですけど、そこの中でこうシンセサイザーとかね、あとメロトロンっていう楽器があるんですけど、それの音とかトロロロロロンとかってなる感じがこの場面に欲しいと思うんですね。そうすると書くっていうか。
So, trying to replicate the sounds that he heard in his favorite prog rock music and horror movies, Araki wrote phonetically what he heard, and then an actor reinterpreted that reinterpretation into what we hear today. And that's how sounds like these turned into sounds like this. And how sounds like these turned into sounds like this. That Araki used music from his favorite bands as inspiration for his battle sounds should come as no surprise, given that a good sizable chunk of his characters are named after them. Part of the fun of JoJo's is going through the adventure and meeting a cavalcade of wild and eccentric characters and their equally eccentric names. Being from Japan, you would think Araki would keep his references squarely on Japanese music, but then here comes the Tibetan spiritual master Ton Petty. You just gotta love how blatant it all is. It's like Araki wants to let everyone know what's on his iPod.
日本のミュージシャンはまるっきり聞かないですね。全然聞かないですね。一人も聞かない。でも外国はもう全部聞くかな。ジャズからクラシックから
好きなジャンルとか。
ラップ。好きなジャンルは黒人系のプリンスとかが好きなんです。
Kind of weird to hear somebody say they even like Prince, as if to say they're one of the very few people who like one of the most successful and popular musicians of all time. But then again, this being the early 90s and him being a native Japanese man, he might very well have been. To say nothing of Araki's comparatively eclectic taste, he certainly wears them with pride, and it shows in his characters, from the brothers Oingo and Boingo to the dreamy Steely Dan, named, of course, after the immortal strap-on dildo from William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch. You think any of those obnoxious baby boomer assholes know that their favorite shit band is named after a fake penis? Now that is a band name. Of course, there are way too many characters to go over here, even if we focus solely on the Stardust Crusaders arc, but it's just a trip and a half to see... wait, what's that? Terrence Trent D'Arby? You don't mean the same Terrence Trent D'Arby that called his debut album better than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, do you? Ah, God, he sounds like Peter Gabriel if he tried to sing Games Without Frontiers with laryngitis. Far be it for me to judge a man by his musical taste, and if Araki liked him enough to name a minor villain after him in his manga, then good for him, but... Terrence Trent D'Arby? Really? Alright, I'm done. Terrence Trent D'Arby! Flames on the side of my face! Heaving breaths! Heaving! It has occurred to me that for all the time I've spent talking about the technical and artistic details, as well as the odd character names of the anime, I have yet to actually talk about the characters in said anime. Guess which one I will not be talking about anymore. Because the plot over the 13 episodes is one long protracted road trip to find Dio in Egypt, there really isn't much of a focus on the characters and their interactions. Rather, they tend to focus on the situation at hand and what they need to do to resolve it. It usually revolving around being the target of one of Dio's henchmen's stand users and their unique ways of making Jotaro and company pay. One of the strengths the show has is the way it choreographs and ramps up an action scene using the Stand of the Day's abilities to its fullest potential. Rest assured, when the scene ends, there is no meat left on the bone. A particular instance comes to mind in the form of Jay Giles, whose stand has the ability to bounce to and from reflective surfaces and attack at the speed of light.
He's in the wall! He's in the mirror!
You know, I joke, but...
You can feel it too!
What was the Ultimate Warrior but somebody's stand that managed to escape its host's body?
So that's where he went! Oh, that little skimp!
The inventiveness and creativity in the stand fights are only made more spectacular and memorable by some truly noteworthy animation for both eras of the production. True, the overall quality and ability for the animation to remain on model can be spotty and erratic, but when the series needs to pull out all the stops, it does so magnificently. The last half of the series is truly commendable in this regard, having to portray intense and complex fight scenes without the aid of digital coloring. And it's to the show's benefit that it's able to do that, because Jotaro Kujo is fascinatingly boring. I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but hear me out. If there was one word to describe Jotaro, it would be unflappable, whether he's battling an enemy stand or navigating a seemingly haunted ship that's being captained by an orangutan. Araki didn't call it a bizarre adventure for no reason, guys. Jotaro handles every single situation with the same stoic, unflinching demeanor in his trademark phrase.
What a pain. What a pain. Oh, what a pain. Oh, what a pain. What a pain.
And it is frustrating, but also really funny. A lot of my problems with the stoic badass archetype is that by its own nature, being stoic means being one note, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for being an involving character, and only serves to undermine the drama that could have been had. Dio has planted a bud of flesh into an innocent man and corrupted his brain, and removing it will prove to be fatal, until Jotaro just ignores his grandpa's and Abdul's warnings and removes it anyway.
Kakyoin isn't dead yet.
Wait, Jotaro! That thing will attack and infiltrate the brain of anyone who tries to remove it.
Just stay away. I'll pull this sucker out without damaging his brain.
And on top of everything else, he's being a petulant little asshole about it too. And this pattern is repeated again, and again, and again. A stand user has the group on their back feet, but then in comes Jotaro to no-sell the situation, and he's completely right about it. And that is where the comedy starts kicking in. No matter what the situation Jotaro finds himself in, his demeanor is exactly the same. He treats being attacked by sentient water controlled by a blind stand user with hearing so sharp he can detect Jotaro from miles away just by hearing his footsteps with the exact same level of due annoyance and subdued exasperation as being accosted by his female classmates who gaggle and gawk in front of him.
Hey Jojo, how come you didn't come to school? It's been 4 days. Hey you! Stop trying to rub those against Jojo's arm. You got a problem, ugly? You shut up, flat chest.
This is very annoying.
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is insane! It's like Jotaro has no sense of scale when it comes to any situation, and that he reacts in such a muted yet contemptuous way no matter the circumstances is both captivating and wholly maddening. It's like if the audience didn't know that Saitama was the strongest man in the world in One Punch Man. If it weren't played for a joke, seeing him continually no-sell his adversary's offense and just clean house with one punch would be a horrible sit. Well, here in JoJo's, it's not expressly played for a joke, and yet it's funny nonetheless. Additionally, it's also really funny to see Jotaro continually cutting the legs out from everyone and anyone around him, especially his elders. Methinks this is why Jotaro caught on with young readers in Japan, given their cultural emphasis on respecting their elders. Seeing a teenage delinquent constantly give his parents and grandparents the business while also being in the right about it must be something of a power fantasy for many a reader who's frustrated with their own family and societal expectations to toe the line. Still, if your only response to any situation is one emotion, then you stop being a character and start being a caricature. Rude, nasty tits. Need I say more? This fact isn't lost on either the actor who played Jotaro, Jorota Kosugi, or even Araki himself. In a press release, Kosugi tries to explain the motivations and characterization of Jotaro, and quite frankly, he seems at a loss for words.
ジョタロと皆さんもご存知だと思うんですけれども、表情もそんなに変わりませんし、喋り方も淡々と喋るので、もちろんそういった意味ではクールなんですけれども、やっぱりそのクールさの後ろにある熱さっていうんですかね。
And Araki seems just as aware that JoJo's aloofness was a detriment to his own manga.
ジョジョの欠点というのはなんかちょっと軽いところがありまして、私は自分でそれはもう性格上の差がだと思って諦めてるんですけど、そのズンとした感じがね、なんか欲しいんですよいつも。なんか骨太のなんていうんですかね、神経質って言いましたけども、そのきめ細やかなところにあるなんか太いドシンとした感じ、そういうのをいつも目指して書いてるんですけど、北岡監督。
At least that's what I think he's trying to say. Goddamn Japanese doublespeak. Thankfully, the story and by extension anime knows how to use Jotaro's detached persona in an actually compelling way in my favorite episode in the entire run, Darby the Gambler. Wait, this is his brother, Daniel Darby. Calm down, Bennett. The entire episode revolves around a poker game played between master gambler and cheater Darby and Jotaro. Gambling with his friends and family's souls, all of a sudden Jotaro's stone-faced demeanor is not only a plus, it actually drives the drama of the episode, culminating in a classic stare-down over whether or not Jotaro is bluffing when he goes all in without even looking at his cards. What's more, this episode is a much welcome departure from the usual goings-on of your typical episode, where the company inevitably falls into the clutches of a stand user and a climactic and explosive battle happens. Here, the life and death stakes are just the same and the tension is perfectly ratcheted to near excruciating levels, and all they're doing is playing cards. That is wonderful. And it also doesn't hurt that this particular episode is ground zero for many an overdrawn constipation face.
I'm not finished. There's the little matter of a raise I'd like to make.
What the? You're raising? But you're out of chips.
I'm gonna raise you. I'm gonna raise you my mother's soul.
What?
Speaking of faces, though, there are still some we're not familiar with traveling in Jotaro's little circle. There's his grandpa Joseph, who can't seem to do anything other than play the exposition bunny.
Incredible. He managed to make a fool out of me. I have to admit, though, his abilities are greater than I ever imagined. This is the story of the destiny bestowed upon the Joestar family. As for the reason why this young man pledged his loyalty to Dio and then attacked you, that reason is right here.
Hey, listen!
There's Abdul, of course, and he basically serves almost the exact same purpose as Joseph, except he's more of a guidance counselor than tour guide, and focuses on the group being emotionally and morally centered. And then there's Inigo Montoya, Jean-Pierre Polnareff. Not for nothing, but a guy who's after a mysterious man with a malformed hand who killed a member of his family.
For a long time, I've been searching for a man whose hands are both right hands.
Polnareff, would you kindly tell us what this is all about?
I've been looking for the man who brutally murdered my younger sister.
My father was slaughtered by a six-fingered man.
And also fights using a rapier.
Hello! My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die!
Come on! Similarities aside, the Frenchman on a revenge mission against the two right-handed man is also my favorite protagonist in the entire series, and that's because he's actually a character. He's honor-bound and virtuous, but also impulsive and quick to anger, as well as a bit of a tail chaser, which lands him into trouble on more than a few occasions. He actually has depth and faults, and he even has something of an arc as Abdul tries to instill in him a sense of self-control, and when it's smarter to run than to fight. Even if the anime treats him mostly as comedic relief, he still functions as he needs to within the context of the group. Individually speaking, each of the characters just don't have all that much to them to drive a series forward, but together, each one-note character creates a chord that the plot can ride on. To borrow Araki's fascination with American music, it's sort of like how Creedence Clearwater Revival, or more specifically John Fogerty, loved to write songs that just vamped on a single chord over and over, but it was done so well that it didn't matter, and the same holds true here. Except for Kakyoin. He's dull as dishwater, and I have no goddamn clue why he's here. His one defining characteristic is that he uses honorifics a whole lot, and that's about it. It's a sad state of affairs that when he's first introduced as a villain for Jotaro to fight in the second episode, he is infinitely more interesting than afterward when it's revealed that he was being mind-controlled by Dio. Because after they free his mind, he just sort of floats around without much substantial interaction with the others. So much so that they shelf him for nearly half the series with an eye injury, and replace him with a dog that likes coffee-flavored bubblegum named Iggy, just because he wouldn't have anything to do otherwise. Oh, and if you're wondering when this scene shows up in the OVA... It doesn't happen, which might very well be for the best. Kyle Bear hasn't been the same since he recorded it. Kakyoin notwithstanding, the characters do their job together in driving the plot forward to their ultimate destination and goal. Enter Dio.
How old are you now?
What?
Why would someone so young wish to hurry his death?
I'm afraid you don't understand the severity of the situation you're in now, Dio. No matter what kind of power the world possesses, you cannot move 1 inch from that spot!
Do you really believe that?
If there was a heart, so to speak, to Stardust Crusaders, it would definitely be Dio. Even though he debuted in the manga in the first arc, being Jonathan Joestar's adopted brother, it's in Stardust Crusaders that he truly came into his own as one of the most entertaining bad guys in anime history. But I hear you all, well, at least those of you who aren't familiar with Jojo, asking, wait, if Dio was Jonathan's adopted brother and he was alive in the 1800s, how is Dio still alive? Well, short answer?
I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
Dio Brando is a vampire after sacrificing his and Jonathan's dad and using his blood on an ancient stone mask after his crimes against Jonathan were exposed. However, these details are kind of lost by the time Stardust Crusaders rolled around, since stands as a concept weren't introduced until then, and no one in Stardust Crusaders was around to experience the wrongdoings of Dio back in the first arc. So Dio's vampiric abilities and past were sidelined in favor of his newfound stand after he awakened from his years-long slumber. Well, technically Dio has two stands, since one of them is his own stand and the other belonged to Jonathan, Dio having acquired it after killing Jonathan and taking over his body, and oh my god, I'm dizzy. As such, the OVA treats Dio's vampirism as something akin to window dressing at best, especially since the series itself bends the rules of what being a vampire means, as according to the common rules and tropes we associate with vampires. He doesn't come out in the sunlight and feast on blood, but holy symbols and water mean nothing to him, and stakes are just as effective. Though he does take a ghoul servant a la Dracula's Renfield, and that ghoul just so happens to be Jack the Ripper! And that little notion is what's most important to note about Dio and his long-standing feud with the Joestar family. He is an evil bastard! And he is in love with that fact.
Hey, I saw you checking out my goods. You want to sample them? A little try before you buy, huh? Come here, bitch. Stand and deliver!
I've been sitting on that joke for 3 years, people! When you break down Dio as a character, he's just as one-note as everyone else, but by God does he hit that one note like a Sopranos aria, which really fits into Araki's stated theme of the entire JoJo series. Araki has stated that he believes conflict in his manga stems from the fact that his villains all believe very strongly in what they do, even when those actions are despicable, which gives them power and strength. He writes his villains with the same amount of passion and, dare I say, positivity as he would his heroes.
悪いことを考えてる人も俺その気持ちもわからんでもねえなみたいなでこう主人公がなった時にちょっとそれ面白くないと思うんですよ少年漫画として多分そうなんですよねさっきも言ったけど本当なんか悪いやつがちょっと弱くなるとなんか話としてね絶対つまんないんですよ人間世界にはそういうのあるかもしれないですけどこういう漫画ではそっちが強い方がいいんですよね
From this frame of mind, you can really get a sense of why Dio is so compelling as a character. He truly does believe in what he does, and he does it with such zeal that you find yourself asking, why shouldn't he grab all the power he can and wipe out the Joestar family? He's Dio. That's what Dio does. And the fact that Dio is so passionate about what he does can't help but rub off onto Jotaro in their final battle. I'm not sure how much of a spoiler I'm playing by saying that the good guy fights the bad guy, but if you haven't seen JoJo and you care about this stuff, then pause the video and skip to this point right now. It's subtly brilliant how Dio manages to get under Jotaro's skin throughout their battle in Cairo, precisely because Jotaro has been, up until now, the taciturn asshole that he is. But it takes the unrepentant assholery of Dio's for Jotaro to finally have a real human emotion. Anger.
There's only one reason for your defeat, Dio. One simple little thing, and that's all. You really pissed me off.
Real stretch for Jotaro, but baby steps. While we're here, the final battle is probably the most impressive action set piece in terms of spectacle, animation, and tension in the entire OVA. The ebb and flow of the battle goes through intense peaks and suspenseful valleys as Jotaro and Dio trade crushing blows with their stands, Spaghetti Platinum and...
The world!
I'll admit, doesn't have the same ring as Zlarado. But between these awesome bits of violence is where the suspense really comes into play, as Dio uses his stand to stop time, blinking in and out of existence without even a trace. It's genuinely creepy and unsettling how Dio bamfs without bamfing.
His star platinum and mine, the world. are similar types of stands. How very unexpected of Star Platinum to come into my frozen world.
It's also worth noting that for the first time in the series, Jotaro seems over his head as Dio spends the beginning of the fight toying around with him. Finally, Jotaro has reason to panic and emote for once. The absolute pinnacle of this fear and anxiety comes towards the second act of the episode, where Jotaro has to play possum to try and fool Dio, resorting to stopping his own heart with his stand. It's that creative mixture of tension and uniqueness that really elevate the fight and ending to such lofty heights. Though if you were expecting Dio's trademark steamroller to make an appearance, well, the director and writer of the episode, Hiroyuki Kitakubo, wanted the climax of the fight to be literally explosive, so he opted instead for an oil tanker for Dio to finish off Jotaro. And while I can see the reasoning behind the decision, there's just no replacing it. Hold on a moment. We've been talking about the characters for like 20 minutes now, but something seems missing.
Chicks, man!
Come again?
I said chicks, man! Where are the chicks?
Women! Yeah, where are the women in Stardust Crusaders? While the manga had a few here and there, both in terms of supporting roles and villain of the day / chapter roles, the OVA had to cut out quite a lot of them, to the point where there were only a handful of them. And the ones that remain are either ethereal wisps of effervescent nothingness, damsels in distress, or sources of annoyance for the male characters. Or all three at once. There's Jotaro's mother, Holly Kujo, who goes from being the verbal punching bag of her own son,
grandson. Damned woman. You even dragged that old man into this.
to being his main driving force to stopping Dio when she suddenly becomes deathly ill from her own stand. Yeah, she has a stand, but get this.
Basically, a stand is called forth by a user's spiritual strength and pressed into action by their fighting instincts. But Miss Holly has a quiet and gentle nature that is not well suited to controlling a stand. No, even worse than that, it's actually done her harm.
We've worried that she did not have the power to resist.
Somewhere out there, a college professor teaching critical theory and feminist studies' head just exploded. There is quite a lot to unpack in such a notion as having a woman not only be ostensibly fridged for the sake of motivation for the male hero, but also be fridged because she doesn't have a quote-unquote fighting spirit. Not to mention the fact that after she becomes sick, the anime rarely checks back on her condition, and thus she is relegated to background noise over the course of the 13 episodes. But I can sum it all up by simply asking, was this really necessary? In fact, that's the same question I keep asking myself over and over again when it comes to the female characters in the OVA. What few there are. On top of the poor treatment Jotaro gives his mother, there's also that scene I brought up earlier with him and those female classmates, who I remind you he regards as nothing but clucking hens. But that's because the anime wants you to empathize with Jotaro's annoyance, so they make these nameless female characters as annoying as possible. The sexism on display is simply unmissable, from Jotaro remarking about how one of those previously mentioned classmates exhibited unnatural strength.
What the hell is going on? This is no girl's strength.
To the anime having another nameless smitten teenage girl give the villainous Whole Horse a means to escape by throwing herself onto Polnareff.
Please run, my dearest Whole Horse.
It's you.
Please run while I hold him. You're my only reason for living. Please escape while you can.
But the weirdest bit of unnecessary sexism comes not from the manga, but the OVA itself. During the makings of the first 7 episodes, Studio APPP decided to add a female character to the anime that wasn't in the manga, if only to make the OVA less of a sausage fest. They were fairly tight-lipped about who this character was, even going so far as to credit the character's name as Dio's Aide. Even when the cast were doing junkets for the show, they only referred to her as a mysterious woman.
私の役自体が謎の女なので、この関係もね、謎でも関わってくるのから先に進めば進むほどということのようです。
So who is this mysterious woman? She's Enya the Hag, who already existed in the manga. Yup, they basically gave Enya here the ability to make herself young-looking, somehow, and that's it. The story revolving around her doesn't really change from the manga outside of this decision, which I sort of get why they did. There really was a shortage of female characters, and the fact that they tried to expand the roster without changing the fundamentals or basis of the story because, keep in mind, they already made the last 6 episodes beforehand so they couldn't go too crazy with it, is at the very least a step in the right direction.
男臭、本当に女性があまり出てこないんですよね。その中で選んでいただいたというのはとても私的にはすごく光栄なんですけれども、声の出演が本当にそうそうたるメンバーで、その中でやらせていただくというこのもちろん緊張もありますけれども、それ以上にめったにこういう現場はねないので、すごくありがたいなという気持ちがありました。
You have got to hand it to Rika Fukami here for being above all else a professional in a very, very unfair circumstance. Nothing but respect here. However, at the end of the day, what Studio 8PPP did to expand the roster of female characters is count the same female character twice by giving her a bullshit power to disguise herself, and then try to obfuscate this by being coy with fans of the manga. What's worse, for a project that was started backwards just to please the fans, they wound up pissing fans off by duping them with a seemingly new character. And the cherry on top of all of this is that even after they revealed that she's Enya the Hag, they still credit her as Dio's aide. It's like they tried to take a step forward, but tripped and landed 3 spaces back. In the interest of fairness, I should make mention that Araki himself admitted that at the early stages of his manga back when Stardust Crusaders first made publication, he had a difficult time drawing women in his stories.
なんだろう、あの当時やっぱりこう女のキャラクターがパンチ食らったりするっていうのはありえない時代だったんですよね。そういうのを女性のキャラクターには書けないような気したんですよ。読者も多分ついてこれないような感じだったんですけど、なんかいろいろこう人生を重ねていくと女の人も男の人も同じなんだろうなと思い始めて、この時にでタフな女の子が描ける感じがしたんですよ。
The climate from which the manga was created wasn't necessarily conducive to a story in which women threw down with men. Even other manga and anime that had female leads and action-oriented stories rarely had said female protagonists actually throw hands. So in such an environment, it's perfectly understandable for Araki to feel the way he did, especially when you consider how graphic and violent the fights can be. We may be able to point to manga like Ranma 1/2, which was first published 10 months after the first chapter of Jojo's, as an example of women fighting in manga, but you never saw Akane get busted open in a prison fight. That he eventually came around to the idea of having a woman hold her own and drive the story is exactly the kind of progress that we see being championed in today's environment, and Araki should be commended for stepping out and trying something new in his then 13-year-old franchise with his first Jojo's heroine, Jolene Kujo. Also, as a little PS to this small digression, the Stone Ocean arc, the manga chapter in which Jolene debuted, came out 6 months before the first episode of the OVA. It's easy to look at a piece of media and label it as problematic regardless of accuracy, but I believe it's important to look at media within the context of who created it and when it was created, because as I stated many times before, art is not made nor experienced in a vacuum. If we take JoJo's as a series and place it when and where it was created, we can see how for its time it was fairly progressive. Hell, even by today's anime standards, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is pretty worldly. Pun quasi-intended. However, that's not to say it is welcoming in its worldliness. By now, we firmly established that Araki had taken many an inspiration from many a different source. But all of this is the product of his love of traveling.
行く国っていうのが魅力を感じる国っていうのはこう歴史がある国なんですよね。だからアメリカとかにはあんまり興味がなくて、むしろこうヨーロッパとかエジプトのあたりっていうんですかね、その辺にすごく興味がありまして。
To create his manga born from his love of experiencing different cultures was something of a minor miracle considering again the times in which it was created.
でもね、あれは超少年漫画では冒険で、外人の主人公は絶対タブーだったんですよ。なんかそういう時代だったんですよね。かなり冒険だから当時の担当さんには本当感謝してます本当。
Coupled that with his fondness for RPGs and cues from stories like Around the World in 80 Days, and Araki spun a tale about a group of men traveling the world to defeat a great enemy. It sounds basic when put to paper, but again, with the context of its chosen medium, it was an important step towards broadening what kind of stories manga, and by extension anime, can tell. But being that he experienced these different cultures and histories through the eyes of someone visiting their respective countries, his stories can never truly be from those countries. His stories will always be a Japanese take on Italian culture, on Egyptian culture, on Indian culture, etc. And Araki is aware of this. As he talks about his trip to Egypt and the experiences he took back with him as influences for Stardust Crusaders, he mentions to director Kitakubo about how his trust was betrayed by con artists and pickpockets.
すごい親切な人なのに、もう完璧裏を変えて騙してるわけですよ。もうこっちは完璧引っかかっちゃってるっていうか、そういう風ななんか人間不信っていうんですか、それに旅行中、もう次から次へと襲ってくるわけで、それが丈太郎たちが旅してる時に出会う人間たちは彼らがモデルなんです。うわ、それはまたその恐怖っていうか、もう疲れちゃうっていうかさ。
Araki realizes that his feelings of anxiety and mistrust were genuine, being a foreign tourist in another country. But thankfully at the same time, he had the presence of mind to compartmentalize his experiences away from the actual people of Egypt. Still, these feelings of suspicion and doubt permeate all throughout Jotaro's adventure.
Please, sign right here, Mr. Joestar.
Old lady, just now you used the name Joestar to refer to him. Tell me, how do you know that name?
In fact, it's because of these same feelings of suspicion and doubt that made my favorite episode so palpably intense. And what's more, they achieved this without leaning too far into the evil foreigner trope. There is a fair argument to be had that the character of Enya could be cut from that cloth, but Dio casts a shadow over her and her otherness, because as the most gleefully evil bastard to walk the planet, how could he not? The manga and the anime play fast and loose with both notions of ethnicity and nationality, seeing as how Jotaro is both American and Japanese, his father being a Japanese jazz musician that has never been seen, and the many stand users that populate Araki's world that are of indeterminable origin. Sadly though, the anime playing fast and loose is one of the major reasons why it is so difficult to find. Yep, we're finally going to talk about it. If you are of the mind to try and grab yourself a copy of the OVA, you'll quickly find out that it would be easier to go and find the Ark of the Covenant than get all 6 volumes. The first 3 DVDs are pretty widely available both on Amazon and Right Stuff for reasonable prices of around $15 to $20. Volumes 5 and 6 are much more difficult and pricey, but occasionally you can find a copy or two floating on eBay or Amazon for around $70 to $100, depending on how generous merchants are feeling that day. Volume 4? Forget about it. I have never seen Volume 4 on sale for less than $200 to $300, and that's if there's even a copy to sell. Why is Volume 4 so hard to find? Personally speaking, I think it's because it has the episode where Jotaro loses his hat.
No one removes my hat, even when I go underwater.
Yeah, I'm just as surprised as you are to find out that the hat comes off. I thought it was just a part of his head. I mean, look at it. Where does it end? Where does it begin? It's like Schrodinger's hat. It both is and isn't. Ha ha! Dumb jokes. Trying to deflect from uncomfortable topics. Gotta love 'em. Okay, so the DVDs were released by an American branch of APPP, dubbed Super Techno Arts. The reason for the name was that they intended to call themselves an acronym named after Stand, but they couldn't figure out what the N and D were gonna stand for, so they just stuck with Super Techno Arts. This lack of forward planning would prove to be a hallmark of theirs, as they launched in 1999, touting JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as their debut release. But it would actually take them 4 years to actually release the first volume in 2003. After localizing and dubbing the OVA at Marcoco Studio, which by the way is in my neck of the woods in Petaluma, it would take them an additional year to fully release the entire series, and by then Super Techno Arts was in financial meltdown. Their dealings with Capcom and another Japanese-American enterprise, Broccoli, you know, the guys who first released Fooly Cooly, were supposed to help fund and streamline their DVDs into the market, but after both companies left STA hanging dry midway through the release, they were forced to press and make the DVDs themselves. Hence why the first 3 DVDs are so common, and the last 3 are so rare. Like, I've read stories where people actually had to call up their comic book shops to call up STA and get them to send these DVDs. And even then, it was a crapshoot if they ever got them. And believe it or not, these aren't the rarest pieces of JoJo media out there. The crown jewel, so to speak, belongs to the Phantom Blood movie, an adaptation of the first arc involving Jonathan Joestar and a pre-vampire Dio Brando. It had a limited release in Japan in 2007, and to this day, no home release has ever been made. What you're looking at is a voiceless series of scenes that were leaked to an American animation school where it was used to teach techniques that somebody managed to upload to a torrent site. That's right, anime has its answer to the day the clown cried. Allegedly, the reason why the movie has never been released was because Araki was very unhappy with it, seeing as how the film cut a bunch of characters from his manga, including Araki's favorite, Robert Speedwagon. Making the situation even weirder is the fact that a tie-in video game was released, again based off of the first arc, that managed to keep the characters that were cut out of the movie, making the film pretty superfluous at the end of the day. Aside from their financial difficulties and their strained business relations, there is one other reason why these DVDs are so hard to find. And it happened exactly 10 years ago this month. In May of 2008, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was the center of controversy when Egyptian fans of the anime noticed in a particular scene in which Dio was flippantly ordering one of his assassins, Whole Horse, to kill Jotaro and his family, Dio was visibly reading the Quran. A groundswell movement soon began on many Muslim forums, grabbing the attention and condemnation from high-ranking clerics such as former chairman at Al-Hajar, the highest Sunni authority, Sheikh Abdul Hamid Hatrash. Quote, "This is an insult to the religion, and the producers would be considered to be enemies of Islam." Within a few days, Shueisha, publishers of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure manga, would put out a public apology, and vowed to stop shipping and pressing the anime until the scene was properly removed. Super Techno Arts would immediately shutter its doors and take down their site, having only released JoJo's Bizarre Adventure over their 9-year existence, despite promises and sneak peeks of 2 other titles, Sci-Fi Harry and Shadow. Both were never released. There is quite a lot to unpack here, so we're going to take this one thing at a time. According to the public apology made by Shueisha, the inclusion of the Quran was made completely by mistake. The original manga panel from which this scene is based on had no legible writing in it, and was never labeled or named the Quran. Shueisha continues, stating that the animators at the time needed Arabic text to put inside the book because of the camera angle, and unwittingly used the Quran, since none of the animators at the time of the production, the late 90s, could read Arabic. If you caught my episode on Angel Sanctuary, then you may remember that this wouldn't be the first time an anime used religion that the developers weren't familiar with. Art director of Evangelion, Kazuya Tsuramaki, admitted that no one on the development team were Christians, and denied there being Christian meaning to the show, and even added that if they had known that Eva would be picked up in the States, they would have rethought about using so much Christian iconography. Though the 2 cases aren't one-to-one, they both share a very important detail when it comes to anime in Japan in general: their isolationist past. When anime was solely a Japanese interest, it didn't quite matter if their portrayals of outside cultures were accurate or not, because who was going to see it that knew better? And thus an entire generation of anime and manga was created solely with a Japanese viewpoint in mind, a viewpoint bred from centuries of isolationist policies which were only recently relaxed, relatively speaking. And from these relaxed policies, Japanese media couldn't help but be influenced by the #1 exporter of media in the entire world: America. Shunya Yoshimi, Japanese sociologist and a current vice president of the University of Tokyo, wrote an article about the effects that America has had on Japan post-World War II, entitled, "What Does American Mean in Post-War Japan?" In it, he writes about how the effects of both the American occupation and American media were so omnipresent during the aftermath and subsequent years after the war that those effects and imprints were completely adopted and seen simply as Japanese. Quote, "Whereas until the early 1950s the word America was simply invoked as a model to be emulated, from the late 1950s Japanese families performing the American lifestyle were presented as the ideals to be emulated. America also came to be associated with the pop culture of Japanese youth. As America became less direct, more mediated, and increasingly confined to images, it conversely became more interiorized, and its effect on people's consciousness became deeper. Over the course of these last 199 episodes of Anime Abandoned, we have explored the many bits of American influence that has shaped the anime industry. Everything from Blade Runner to professional wrestling, and too many to list in between. But these bits aren't a complete representation of America. All media is confined within a frame, sometimes literally as with paintings and film, but always subjectively. No singular piece of art has the ability to contain and, most importantly, distinguish the entirety of the universe, let alone humanity. In this way, it is impossible to capture every single minute detail of any nation, America or otherwise. In the wake of such an enormous notion, what can one do but rely on shorthand? Pieties, archetypes, cliches, all tools that have been used, knowingly or not, to keep people outside the frame. Be it people of color, the queer community, or people of differing faiths or lack thereof, have been at the brunt end of this equation, and only recently has the larger sphere of media begun the enormous task of pushing these boundaries to let them in. But as long as this has taken American media to do, it has taken Japanese media even longer to vicariously absorb these cultural shifts, because these same racially and religiously marginalized people are a world away. Today, Japan has the biggest cultural footprint on global media that it has ever had, but with that increased impact comes accountability. Back when Pokemon first made air in 1998, several episodes were either kept or delayed from being shown on American television, one of them being the episode Holiday Hijinks, which prominently features the Pokemon Jinx. Now, Jinx was speculated as having been primarily influenced by a monster in classic Japanese folklore, Yamauba. Specifically, how Yamauba was often portrayed in Japanese theater called no theater. The long platinum hair, the dark skin, the exaggerated lips are certainly unmistakable, if you're familiar with no theater. If you are not, then you might feel that Jinx is a caricature of black people based off of harmful, stereotype-driven cartoons and comics that permeated American culture for centuries. Now, the intent and the historical context of Jinx was certainly not for portraying her in such a manner, but that does not erase the decidedly American context of such a viewpoint that the Japanese developers were not privy to, just as the history of Sambo and Al Jolson doesn't erase the context of Yamauba. Context doesn't erase context. It only adds to it. So in the face of two opposing yet equally valid viewpoints, what can be done? Well, it starts and ends with intent. As the existence of Jinx became more and more embroiled in controversy, eventually the developer of the Pokemon games, Game Freak, would change her color scheme to purple, these changes only taking effect outside of Japan until it was finally made canon several years later. This decision to change her design may have been the result of the critical backlash aimed at Game Freak and Nintendo, and while it was their intent to homage Yamauba, ultimately, their most important intent was not to offend anyone, to not belittle anyone, and certainly not to reinforce racial stereotypes. But in a moment of cultural ignorance, they made a creative decision that wound up betraying their own intent, so they made steps to correct it, which is the reasonable and right thing to do. It would be easy to call this an act of self-censorship, but that would be a product of reductive logic. To call this self-censorship would imply that they truly intended for Jinx to be a racial stereotype, and that is clearly not the case. And the same goes with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Araki, Shueisha, and APPP obviously did not mean to offend anyone with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. They only meant to tell an entertaining story. But through a moment of cultural ignorance and carelessness, they wound up offending an entire religious sect, betraying their collective intent. Shueisha responded swiftly, not only halting production of the anime, but also the manga, even going so far as to have Araki redraw several panels after they noticed that a lot of the buildings being destroyed therein were very similar to mosques, a fact which was never brought up as a point of contention in the online uproar. And that fact really speaks to the situation, because it seems that everyone was offended by the image and the background story of the image, rather than the anime itself. This was 2008, there were no anime streaming sites available, and there was no officially licensed release of the anime available in Egypt, so how did anyone even know about the scene in question? If it was extremely difficult for people in America to get their hands on an official DVD, it must have been impossible for anyone in Egypt to see it. The answer? Fan subs. The OVA was subtitled into Arabic by Arabic fans of the series, and was available to download illegally since 2007. Obviously, the fans who subtitled the anime and built a community around it weren't perturbed by the presence of the Quran, and knew very well that Dio was an evil bastard way before the scene in question. But like so many times before, when people react to the speed of their feelings, they inadvertently negate context and presume to know everything about the situation when they don't. They saw what they saw, learned enough to know that Dio was the bad guy and had done wicked things, and that was the end of it, leading to grandstanding and public outcry, further muddying the context. Robert Wool once said in an HBO special, "Judge slowly." And just like how it's important to keep true to your intent, I also believe it's important to follow his words. If you're feeling offended or attacked by something you've witnessed, your feelings are valid because you felt them. They exist. But that cannot be where your thinking stops. You have to allow yourself to take a step back and observe all pertinent and available information. Sometimes situations are more clear-cut than others, but you are doing yourself and others no favors by thoughtlessly reacting and spreading misinformation and anger. And going over the events like I have, I can only come to one conclusion. This whole situation, it was stupid. Just depressingly stupid. In the end, no one was hurt, and thankfully so. And the manga series would continue, later getting a new anime adaptation with new episodes coming out as of this writing. The only ones who suffered from all of this were the people at Super Techno Arts, who broke their backs trying to get the OVA out to as many people as they could, going so far as to press the DVDs and ship them out themselves. All that effort, all that work, only for APPP to unceremoniously give them the axe. What a world. Well, I'm thoroughly depressed. But who said that every story had to have a happy ending, right? Still, I feel there's one last question to answer. Do I like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Giving my blanket opinion on the OVA, I feel that JoJo's is one of those kinds of anime that take a certain kind of person to appreciate it. Sure, it's offbeat and that engenders a certain kind of audience, but I mean more than just the trappings and eccentricities of the series. Because if I had to summarize JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I would say that it is the most anime to have ever animated, for all the good and bad that entails. The dialogue is clunky and suffers from transliteration, the music is cheesy and so on the nose that there are literal dun-dun-duns, and the conceit is silly and easily off-putting, but that's anime, isn't it? When we typify the anime style and the tropes that inform it, we are picturing within our heads JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, whether we realize it and mean to or not. I said at the top of the episode that there couldn't be a better choice for a milestone episode like this, and after spending over an hour talking about it, my only hope is that you can see why. It's an almost endless well of discussion for people to have, and that is what Anime Abandoned is all about. Promoting discussion. Obviously, you can't very well go out and get yourself the OVA, but thankfully the recent anime series is readily available and tells pretty much the same story. I encourage all of you to go and check it out, and join the conversation. It's weird, it's wonderful, it's frustrating, it's satisfying, it's bizarre. And I love it for it. If I haven't made it clear by now, I want to thank you all for joining me these past few years and helping me to get to 200 episodes. I don't know when I'll stop talking about anime, but for as long as there are interesting titles and interesting discussions to be had, it won't be anytime soon. Thank you all again. And good night.
We
Hey, Linkara.
Hey man, I heard you had a big milestone episode recently as well. Just wanted to call up and congratulate you on your 500th episode.
Actually, it's my 200th.
Don't worry. I'll be seeing you at your 500th episode in 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you'll be seeing me, Linkara. You'll be seeing me in hell!
You hear me, Linkara? You'll be seeing me in hell!
If that's the way he wants to play it, then fine! It's on. Next time, not quite anime month, and we're teeing off on Teen Titans. Till fucking next time!